Bryan County Commissioners meeting, January 15th, 2019.
Good morning. It is 9 a.m. and we're here for the Tuesday, January 15th board meeting. Three commissioners on board this morning, along with Mr. Johnson, our administrator, and Bill Ham, our clerk. So, can you hear back there? Is that any better? Turn that mic up. Yeah. Start squeezing it.
Daryl, can you hear this mic okay? Okay.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Must be getting something working back there. Okay. With that, welcome everybody, and if you would rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are we initiating the call, Keith?
Yes, sir.
We have a lobbyist in Olympia that during legislative session will, I think it's every other week, he'll touch base with us about what's going on this week, which at this point would be nothing in action. I think they're just going on board today.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jim and Zach. This is Keith Johnson from Franklin County. We are in an open board meeting, and you're on the speakerphone.
And thank you for calling, guys. We appreciate it. The first couple of days of the session, and so there's not a whole lot to report, but we do have some things going on here. I got quite a bit of environmental legislation coming down the pike here. A lot of stuff that's single sponsor, but that doesn't mean it's not a concern for us. So they're talking about a lot of transportation, fuel taxes, and things like that so far. Looking at what's coming up, there is some stuff on indigent defense coming up here this week, and different public health issues that they're having hearings for. We'll keep you apprised on those here as the week goes along. Was there anything that you guys had, any questions or comments or anything that's come up since we came down to see you that you might want us to look at?
Commissioners have any thoughts? Back on at this point, so we'll move on with our agenda. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Do we have any addition or corrections for January 2nd or November 27th of 18 minutes? If not, I'll sign them as approved. Hearing none, I will sign them. So, our next item on the agenda is short plat. Derek, please. Morning.
Thank you, Chair and Commission. Hey, Derek, since we're having trouble with microphones, would you bring that right up close and make sure you're talking like within 2 inches of it, please?
Yeah.
Is this...
Or just speak right into it.
Okay. Yes, this is a request to deviate from the standard lot standards. The subject is to consider approval for an acceptable minimum lot size for a short plat. Per county code, minimum lot frontage of lots with greater than 25,000 square feet in gross area is 120 feet, except for when they front on a cul-de-sac. Additionally, the code states that excessive depth in, still not, huh? Wow, get up, okay. All right. Additionally, code states that excessive depth in relation to width shall be avoided. Lot depth exceeding 3 times the lot width shall be avoided. However, the applicant has requested a waiver from these standards requirements, which is possible for Franklin County Code 16.16040C on a case-by-case basis. The waiver is subject to approval by the County Board of Commissioners. The owners of 10 nearby lots have provided a letter in opposition to the request to deviate from the lot dimensions. This is an application with Ben Case of Many Waters Development, and it's for the approval of a 6-lot short plat. The proposal is to divide approximately 4.28 acres into 6 new lots. I apologize, there is a discrepancy in the acreage, and that is due to a boundary line adjustment that occurred in October of 18 that had not been updated in the assessor's records. In general, when we are doing our ASRs, we rely on the assessor's site as the official record. Unfortunately, sometimes there's discrepancies with regard to that as far as when those records were updated. So the reality is that property after the boundary line adjustment is closer to 4.28 acres gross. There's set aside, the actual bill proposal is closer to just shy of 4 acres. So it's zoned RS20, requiring a minimum of lot size of 20,000 square feet. The proposed plat is generally located in the northeast corner of the intersection of Richardson Road and Road 72, and it's currently not addressed. Building Planning Department staff does recommend approval of the waiver based on no material detriment to the neighborhood from the proposal. If the board deems that a waiver to the lot frontage and depth width ratios should be granted, the Planning and Building Department will proceed to issue preliminary approval with conditions of the short plat and include the board's determination with the findings of fact. If the waiver is not granted, the department will return the short plat back to the applicant for modification to meet the standard code requirements. All final plat approval, basically the signing of the Mylar, is handled by the Planning and Building Director. So, any questions?
Commissioners?
I have several questions, but happy to defer to the board and go last unless you want me to start.
Go ahead. Please start.
So, Derek, you said that the determination from the Planning Commission, the reason that you recommended approval was that there's no material detriment.
This has not been seen by the Planning Commission. It's not an item that goes to the Planning
I'm sorry, did I say Planning Commission? I thought I said Planning Department.
That's what I heard. I'm sorry.
Okay, so let me start over. In your comments, you said that the Planning Department, your office, was recommending approval because you didn't see any material detriment.
Correct.
And I'm curious, what's the standard for material detriment?
And it's generally a material like, for example, damage to surrounding landowners, a risk to health and safety, an activity that's going to make it so that the approved land uses cannot continue or would be prohibited because of this action. This action would make, like, for example, in that area, it's RS20. So if there was something that occurred in this application or that would basically either increase the risk of the health and safety of the public to a point that cannot be mitigated, or can show a direct correlation or something like that where other landowners are harmed.
Okay, so am I correct in assuming that it is the responsibility of the planning director yourself to look at those factors and make a subjective judgment as to whether or not it rises to the level of any of those?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, and so the first one you named was impact on adjoining properties and others. Do you feel comfortable that you're in a position to judge what the impact is on the surrounding individuals and their properties?
No, only in relation to things such as health and safety. Matters of aesthetics, I don't believe is actually under the purview of my department unless it's a specific call out, for example, design standards or something like that.
Okay.
Aesthetics are more under the purview of the community and the commission to make. That's why this type of a deviation is brought to you as opposed to a decision made administratively.
Sure. So the very first item you mentioned, and I don't remember exactly how you said it, but was impact on the neighboring properties. What kind of impact are we talking about? Is it an aesthetic impact, a value of the property?
My experience has been that I've not seen new development lower property values. What generally lowers property values is surrounding existing landowners not maintaining their property, or industrial, commercial, basically incompatible uses where you've got emissions or something like that disturbing the expected residential character of a community.
So then that too is a subjective evaluation as to whether or not there's likely to be a material detriment to those other properties in terms of their value, livability, and so forth.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, just trying to understand if you're the person who is making these assessments, it's useful to know what criteria and what standards you're applying. The acreage on this package changed 3 times in the course that we got it. In some respects, it's fortunate that the number kept getting bigger because that means that each of the lots remains large enough that it still requires this process.
Correct.
If it had turned out that the lots were smaller, below 25,000, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. So,
Yep.
So whether that's fortunate or not, I suppose, just from a process standpoint. Are there, in your estimation, other ways that these lots could be laid out that this waiver would not be required?
Yes. However, I do not know the cost differentials between this proposal and the alternatives. But yes, other alternatives definitely exist.
I don't recall you listing in the list of material detriments and factors by which we would approve this the cost to the developer. Is that one of the...
Generally speaking, the code doesn't necessarily recognize that as a material detriment. In other words, that's when you make your determination, is when you can pencil it out.
So then, in terms of the list of factors to be considered, if it can be developed another way, but it costs the developer more money, that's not necessarily a material detriment. Certainly, it's not listed in the code as one of the considerations.
Correct. It's not on my purview to make that determination.
Okay.
It is something we always strive to minimize those costs associated with development, but at the same time, it's not a...
Sure. So, Mr. Chairman, I've got other questions and comments, but I want to make sure I don't dominate the time if there's anyone else who wants to speak.
Commissioner Daly?
Well, it seems to be one of the, they're asking for relief is for the frontage from 120 to 90.
As well as the depth ratio.
Yeah, but
3 to 1.
if we kept the frontage at 120, the ratio of width to depth is within.
Correct.
So why don't we go with the 120? That would be the simple fix.
I'm not the applicant. I'm merely, he presented, and through the code, he is authorized to request this. I would suggest, I believe Mr. Case is in the audience. I would recommend any questions regarding his intent or the whys would be directed to him.
Can you speak to us?
As far as I know, there'd be nothing else.
Yes, please.
Appreciate the opportunity, Commissioners. Ben Case, Many Waters Development. Do you need an address or you good? Okay. Yeah, so these are great questions, and obvious, this is why you're weighing this up. Maybe as a little background of the reasoning why I'm asking for the variance, kind of dovetails off of some logistical and circumstantial requirements to this specific property. And when you look at the map of that property, there's the first, challenge that I incurred when evaluating this property and the feasibility of it is the continuation of this Richardson Road, which I believe the intent for the Public Works is to push that through as a through road for future growth and development. And back in July, I actually emailed the Public Works asking them, do they intend to follow through with that, or if they were, and what my proposal was is I'd like to mirror the property right across the street to the east with the cul-de-sac feeding off of Road 72, because realistically we could make that work, but it would require abandoning that Richardson Road idea. And the reply back, and I have a copy of that email if you guys need it, is no, the Public Works wanted that road to be dedicated and pushed through. And as a developer, the problem that created is that requires essentially a 40-foot dedication and loss of that 40 feet of gross area. And when that happens, it makes that cul-de-sac running east and west infeasible, because now what it is, the lots get too compressed, I guess is a good way to put it. In other words, they wouldn't be deep enough to build the kind of homes that would fit the neighborhood. And so basically I had to abandon the cul-de-sac idea coming off of Road 72 running east and west, and basically focus on my options coming off of Richardson Road. And for your benefit, I'll provide you, this is when I paid my surveyor, I'll give you a copy of this. We sat there for about 4 hours.
Thank you.
Running every viable scenario of lot configuration with a cul-de-sac and coming off of Richardson. And what we run into is that it was just this weird geometry question, that just wasn't solvable. Because what we have is limitations on, you have to have at a very minimum a net size of 0.5 acres, and with the health code. And so as we're running all these different scenarios, it ended up being that I'd be standing here in front of you today looking for some kind of variance of some kind of degree, okay, from 3 different angles, either looking for a variance on the right-of-way dedication, looking for a variance on the health department requirements, or looking for a variation on this lot dimension question. So in my esteem, that's the reason why I'm here today, is basically saying, look, I had to evaluate the lesser of three evils, and this was it. And the alternative, in my opinion, of not having the cul-de-sac actually benefits the end user in the long run. In other words, with the cul-de-sac, we ended up that everybody was going to end up with the same frontage, 90 feet, but they're going to end up with a half an acre lot. If I just ditch the cul-de-sac and just not pave that country, just basically just run the road right up the front and feed it as presented, I'm before you looking for the same variance, but the difference being is that what I'm saying is, hey, let's let the consumer have 0.69 acres instead of 0.5 acres, and then paving the balance of it, because that's what the alternative would have been. So I'm looking at the same. They're going to end up with the same lots that are the same width. Just the question is, am I going to be paving 4,000 to 9,000 square feet of their lot for a cul-de-sac, or can I just give it to them straight, like this proposal, and let them do what they want to do with it? And that's kind of where it came from.
But still, my question is, if you just give them the 120 foot of frontage, you're within compliance of everything.
True. So then this comes to the question of, my feasibility with the numbers, what's economically feasible. And if I'm going to be pushed to, sacrificing, I'm going to go the other direction and actually develop it with 18 lots and make it a Hayden home development. And I don't want to do that. what I'm saying is that I'd make them smaller lots, and I'd end up with 1,000 to 1,200 square feet, 1,500 square feet, and we did put a community septic system out there.
So, sir, you were saying that you prefer to provide the consumer the larger lot.
I would.
And I understand the economics of these developments pretty well after 10 years of going through this process. Certainly, if you did one lot fewer, you would have sufficient room to do the kind of large lot developments that you want to do. You would give those consumers the larger lot that you just said you'd like to give them. Obviously, you'd have one less home site to sell.
Right.
But the value of each of those goes up commensurately, excuse me, with the larger lot as well. And I realize there's a delta between the two. I get that. Cul-de-sacs are not always the only option. Hammerheads are acceptable to the fire code. I don't recall off the top of my head what the square footage use is and which one is more efficient. But just thought I would mention that. But I am curious, the notion of coming with a cul-de-sac from the east end of the property off of 72, were you saying that the distance north-south of your property is not sufficient when encumbered with a 40-foot road right-of-way for the extension of Richardson, which I see on the plat currently shows as a 30-foot. So did I understand that correctly, is that there isn't enough north-south land to accommodate the cul-de-sac plan?
Well, let's clarify a couple things. So I'll address this one if you don't mind. I'll address some of the other options, because I want to say that as far as the idea of a hammerhead versus a cul-de-sac, again, we explored these options. It's not actually permissible, unfortunately, in this situation. At least that's my understanding from our exchange with the Public Works Department. And when it comes to this, addressing this delta, as far as the value of let's say a 3/4 acre lot versus the value of a 6.6 acre lot, respectfully, the consumer is indifferent.
Yeah,
So,
and respectfully, I would offer that we've already had testimonies from our planning department that the valuations and profitability for the developer is not one of the standards or criteria in the detriment equation. So just keep that in mind too,
correct,
please.
yeah.
So I understand and I do appreciate the economics of it. I do.
Yeah, and so that's the only reason why I'm saying it's kind of like this option, or we fully develop it to its total potential with 1/4 acre lots, which would obviously be counter to what what the neighbors are concerned about.
Yeah. Do you have city sewer on either of those streets now?
No, so there's an option that we've explored in other projects in other communities with community septic, and then they can actually roll that into a public sewer system if and when available.
Okay. I'll just offer that the Board of Health is comprised of 6 county commissioners sitting there in ex officio capacity. So we're not there as county commissioners, we're there as members of the Board of Health.
Sure.
And if you decide that you want to go in that direction, I'd really respectfully encourage you to have that conversation with them in advance, because I have.
Okay.
And I think you might find that a difficult thing to do. I'm not saying, I can't presuppose what the 6 commissioners on that board would do. I'm only one of the 6. But I would encourage you, if you decide to go to that way before you invest anything, please meet with them.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. No, and so then back to the dedication part. Well, when we have to have these gross and net calculations for lot size, and when we're looking at the depth concern that we would have with an east-west run, what we have is a 20-foot setback out front, a 20-foot setback in the rear for the homes. And literally that's what we would be saddled with, and then you got to fit a septic system in that half acre. And so again, coming back to this delta, the delta that I'm dealing with, as far as maybe not economically, but more of just like I said, the geometric concern, is that as soon as we pop any kind of additional dedication aside from the 40 feet for Richardson Road, and when I say 40 feet, you have 30 feet for the right of way, but then you have to give another 10 feet for the utility easements. And those all net out of these calculations. And so that's the only reason I bring that up. And
Excuse me one second, Derek. The 10-foot utility easement can be used concurrently as the setback for the back of the lot. Am I not? Is that not correct?
Correct.
Okay. So then it sounds like you're counting a 10-foot utility easement and a setback behind the lot as being two separate 10 foots, and they can be the same 10 foot.
sure, but when I'm saying the 40 feet, it also meets into my calculation for the health code, for the health department, because we have, the way this property falls, some of the property on the north end has a soil structure that we can use a gross half acre, whereas on the bottom half, we have to use a net.
Right.
So again, with these setbacks, the septic placement, and so forth, it just ends up being I was short roughly 15,000 square feet.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's what I ran into with every one of these other scenarios.
And
But
you're
but
correct.
respectfully-
It's a misnomer that a half acre is sufficient for a septic system because it depends on the soils, and it can go from a half all the way up to an acre. And in some cases, you can't even put a septic on them. So if you've got problematic soils on the lower end of that property, I would just offer a piece of unsolicited friendly advice, which is if you've got difficult soils at the lower end of that property, going to quarter acre lots in community septic is going to be a real challenge.
Totally understand, and we're familiar with how that rolls. And
Okay,
it's
good.
tough. It's not ideal,
Yeah.
but again, trying to get our investment out of this is really that's our struggle, not yours.
Absolutely agree, and thank you for making that distinction, because that really isn't, for us to consider. I mean, speaking for myself personally, I'd love for you to make a ton of money on it and go develop more stuff.
Right.
So I don't have any adverse interest there, but it does feel a little bit like we're trying to squeeze about one too many large lots out of this, and that's
Well,
just
and if I can just offer, and again, not keeping it, but really my rationale for this is that, again, referencing this, the schematic with the gross calculation of acreage, is that my preference as a consumer would be not to pave, roughly half an acre of the property. I'd rather just have that half acre, my share of that half acre, for my own use. And that's what it comes down to.
If I could ask, I'm not a developer. I've done a little bit of work, but nothing on a commercial scale. As I looked at those lots, and view it as if you were standing on Richardson Road facing north towards your property, and you're right in the middle of your property, east to west. As you're looking at it from that perspective, you've got a series of long, skinny north-south lots. Would it be possible to, well, it's really hard to describe without drawing it, but what I was envisioning is that on the west border, starting from the left, you've got those first two narrow lots. If you went to the right-hand side or the east side of that second lot, and you put a drive halfway up through the middle of the property, and instead of a cul-de-sac, you had that feed a square lot in the northwest corner, and those two lots in the southwest corner, those two long skinny ones, if you turn those into a square lot, it looked like you'd come up with the same number of lots just by orienting that way. And so I'm sure you thought about that and looked at it. What was the prohibition? Was it emergency vehicle access and turnaround?
And just allowance. And so I think that's the reason why when Derek, and I can't speak for Derek, but that's the reason I sat with him a number of times running these different scenarios, and they don't allow private driveways or hammerheads like that. I think that would be the solution. And if you guys, and again, all these proposals come up with needing some kind of variance. And so in my mind, this was the simplest one.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to grant me a variance that I can have a private driveway to feed those two back lots, I'm in. I mean, that'd be ideal.
Well, I appreciate your flexibility, but I do want to point out one thing is that you've said several times that every one of these options leads you to a variance.
Right.
There is an option that doesn't require a variance.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what that alternative would pose is I'm going to pursue another opportunity that doesn't require variance either.
If the health department will provide the
Sure,
septic. And
but again, I did bring. I think I left him with Derek last night, not knowing I'd have an opportunity to visit or speak.
Sure.
But I did leave a site map, but I guess maybe didn't So Sand Hollow Homes, that's who we, work.
Yeah, we all got them.
Oh, did you? Oh, great. Okay. So I did leave that just to again give some little assurances. That's how we vision it, and that's we already have 2 consumers that are that buy the vision of what the value it brings, which is again the opportunity to have a really nice large acreage opportunity at a relatively more consumer-friendly price point, because what's going to end up happening inevitably if you end up with larger big homes, because that's really what the value is. The lots at 3/4 acre versus 0.6 acres, it's really about what you build on it. And these are going to be homes that are nice complementary homes, but they're not going to be $500,000 big mansions.
And I guess that's my point. If you just gave up that extra 30 feet on the frontage, you're going to still have a big lot. You're going to be in compliance with everything.
Well, but again, I economically, I can't reason to want to go out there and put all those improvements when I could have another option that would actually make it a net project as opposed to a net loss project. Because that's, obviously I don't do this just to occupy my time.
But we're also listening to your neighbors, and they have concerns about their property and the value of their property, and I think that's got to be weighed heavily.
Well, and I think that's what my counter to the argument is that that's what I presented, is like, look, these homes are complementary, if not even enhancing, and the better end value to the end consumer.
Beautiful homes. I got to agree.
Well, and that's the end consumer is what I'm looking at, as opposed to just paving it.
Eric, there's some brief discussion here about hammerheads and extended drives. Were you able to follow that probably sketchy verbal description I was giving of how these could be laid out? But what is the issue there? That's one. 2, is it a strict code requirement? That's 2. And 3, is that eligible for waiver reconsideration?
We're really starting to move more into the realm of Public Works' purview. I've seen different designs, and I do recall the one Mr. Case was mentioning where he had them running up, and then there were 2 back properties and things. I was not involved in the discussion as to the why or what.
Well, fortunately for us, we have the Director of Public Works here.
I was going to throw him out here.
Matt, I'm sure this is not your primary expertise, but is there a chance you could help us? Thank you. So to be clear, you've got this rectangle, and instead of doing a lot of skinny lots like this, doing a square one, square one, square one, square one, and then you've got a center drive that serves the back 2. If the answer is you've got to meet with a county engineer, I would understand that, because I would have to also.
No, I mean, the requirement when it comes to turnarounds, whether it be a hammerhead, cul-de-sac, those types of things, really comes down to the comments that we've received through these processes in the past, both from the school district and the fire chief. That we're seeing a trend where everybody is pushing away from the hammerheads because that still requires some pull-through, backup, and then leave the school district. Matter of fact, in previous projects where we've built those types of hammerheads, we've had issues where all of a sudden the Pasco bus district basically says we're not going to go down that road anymore because our insurance doesn't allow our drivers to back up. So there's increasingly this big push to go away from those types of turnarounds and require more of a cul-de-sac. So
Okay,
really,
excuse me, but we're not talking school buses here, and we can back up fire trucks. And Commissioner Cook over the years has educated me that that's not ideal. And for the sake of expediency, let me just jump in and say, I think the issue is that the fire trucks want to be able to access from a public road and fight a fire and do rescue from a public roadway, and having to go up an extended driveway presents a couple of problems. One is if it's not a huge, you could end up blocking that drive, and then you block your emergency egress. If, say, a propane tank blows up and everybody's got to get out of there quickly, you have that difficulty. But if you had a wide enough drive for side-by-side, you probably could, but then go back to the developer's concern, and now you're eating up a lot of the property with asphalt. So I think you actually did answer the question for me, and I appreciate it, which is set aside any questions of efficiency. It poses some additional risk to, in this case, school buses don't apply, but it does pose additional risk to responders not having another egress route. The only other thing I could think of is if there was a private drive extension off of Road 72 going west that then turns south and bisected the property, you could probably get some access that way, but that gets costly, and that also eats up some land. So I appreciate your help. You did help. And if you got something else you want to say, that's fine. I just want to let you know you did answer my question.
I think the easiest answer I should have gave was the fact that those aren't our requirements, public works requirements as it pertains to cul-de-sacs, turnarounds. What we do is we provide input based on what we know people are going to hear from the fire chief and from the school district. Like I said, all of those that you mentioned are still part of our design guidelines.
Sure.
But I mean, is a private driveway, I mean, is that even, because I didn't see anything in the code that would allow it to be two lots.
As far as I'm aware of and concerned, their private driveways are allowable. We have even design standards for private lanes and private roads right in our design standards, road design standards. So we have developments like Ivy Glades that the whole development is all private roads. So from that standpoint, I don't know that there is any prohibition, at least not from public works standpoint, on private lanes or private roads that provide just egress to the residents with any short plat or subdivisions.
Yeah.
That's
So,
not public works provision.
Mr. Chairman, I would share at this point that my perception is that we've got the classic situation where we have a desire to help a developer be successful in our county because we appreciate them being here and helping develop the county. And on the other hand, we've got the interests of surrounding citizens who came to that area, developed their homes in compliance with the code, and there is, whether it's aesthetic or property values or anything else, I think we have to honor and respect their perception of impact. And when you weigh those two out, I'm always inclined to give deference to people who follow the rules and didn't have variances. At the same time, we can, in an effort to do no harm, we can create greater harm. The gentleman has suggested that his alternative plan might be to do a high-density small lot development, which might also be undesirable to the surrounding properties and might actually have a financial impact on the values of their properties. So having said all that and weighed it out, my thought is maybe this is one of those times, as the developer's on a really short timeline, where it might be constructive to allow for one more opportunity to look at the private road option to see if we have overlooked something there that would serve everybody's interest. That's one. Two, ask the developer to give us at least a notional outline of what he's thinking about for a small lot development so that the surrounding landowners can see what that option might look like. And then see at the end of that process, which doesn't have to take very long, as far as I'm thinking it could be done in a week, then we'd have the benefit of more information. If not, then I would say that I'm probably inclined at this point, everything I've heard, to say that I absolutely appreciate and respect the fact that the gentleman is trying to extract as many lots as he can from his property. It's exactly what I would do, but I'm inclined to respect the fact that there are half a dozen or more neighbors who feel that it's a negative impact, and I'm obligated to honor their concerns and recommend that we not approve it. But my preference is that first approach, which is we get folks around the table and see if the private drive option would work, and also ask the developer to give us a notional idea of what his alternative plan looks like if this doesn't go through.
And you will look in that in a week's time and come back to us, and we'll put this on hold for a week.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Does that work with you, gentlemen? Okay.
And thank you very much for being able to do that. I'm especially interested in that private drive option, because if we can do that legally, I think we can satisfy all concerns. If we can't, then at least the surrounding landowners can see what your alternative proposal looks like.
And I just want to confirm, you're wanting this to be brought back next week?
Please,
Okay.
unless there's a time frame problem.
I can make it work.
Okay, because we need things by a certain day, so we'll talk.
We'll talk.
And then I'll let you know whether or not it's going to be next week or delayed a week.
These are the home designs that
Yeah, we have one tentative reservation. Obviously, it was contingent on this. So, but yeah, that's those are what he has in his
portfolio, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what a person would expect to see on those properties.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, one of them's already softly committed.
Yeah.
They need to see this fall through.
Okay. Thank you. Those are good-looking homes.
I don't understand what the 30 feet's all about, homes, right? Yeah. Everything's in compliance.
Going to lose one lot. Okay, we will move on to a grant award. I think we've got Keith and Steve.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. The Washington State Healthcare Authority has, at least preliminarily, awarded a grant to Franklin County to our correctional facility. Mr. Stoltenmeyer has been instrumental in getting this grant awarded to the county. It is for opioid treatment network projects going on in the jail facility, and I don't want to speak too much for you. I'm glad, Steve, for you to kind of apprise the board of what this means, but at a high level, this will help offset some of our medical costs in the jail for the identification and treatment of those coming into the facility that have a opioid substance abuse problem, and will allow them to see a medical professional when they are brought into the facility rather than have to wait. And we can maybe let Steve
Westing get the people in place. The first requirement of the program is to have one feedback, one data, one person through into February to be on that list and going through that. We have several who do the prescribing for us and get these things set up so that we should flow right along with it.
Okay.
There's never a full guarantee all the time.
Well, I see on our agenda that this is the second week that we're stepping away from Lords, and we're engaging with Lords in this. I'm just trying to figure this out, what's going on here with Lords.
If I can.
Yeah, sure.
So this is a standard grant that law enforcement applies for all the time, depending on what it is. It is a grant that essentially I have signed and agreed to. The money sits in a bucket, and what you do is on a monthly basis you send a report card back and you show what took place, and that money is then reimbursed. And all needs to be created is essentially a line item that says, here's the bill, so the county can send the bill to the state then reimburses, and it's just a pass-through. The money's there. Trust me, we will make sure that all the reporting is done properly. It's a grant. I mean, I've dealt with them for years and years and years, and the county will not lose any money. Actually, the county ultimately is going to gain money.
Okay.
Because they're not going to be paying so much out in medical costs.
Correct.
It's not an enabling program. It's a program so that when a person comes into the jail that has an opioid addiction, or in police slang, they're a heroin addict,
we're able to provide them medical assistance to help them while they're sitting in the jail going through withdrawals. What happens with heroin addiction is if you're sitting in a jail with withdrawals, all kinds of medical things happen to you, but ultimately what you end up with is suicide attempts because of how they're going through those withdrawals. Since my tenure as the sheriff, we've had one where a person has hung themselves in the jail while coming off of opioid addiction. So it is a good thing. It's not an enabling program. It's more of a treatment and monitoring program to help them reduce those withdrawal symptoms, which are truly, if you watch it, it's not good, and it takes a lot of manpower to do that. And instead of having corrections deputies sit there watching people going through withdrawals, okay, what happens is we now have a medical staff person that there is assisting them with that, and the medical people take care of it. Then when they exit out of the jail, they have a place to go to try to continue on with that treatment. And so it's a good time to intervene, and we're not paying for it. The taxpayers of Franklin County aren't paying for it. It's a grant.
This is where I differ. The taxpayers of Franklin County are paying for it because the money that is collected from the Franklin County taxpayers goes to the state.
Well, actually, if you research the grant, it's a Burns Grant Fund. It's money that was taken from the task forces, narcotics task forces across the state, of federal money that came in, that was passed through and removed from narcotics enforcement, passed down for this. So
$21 million
that's
for
right.
the state.
That's right. That's why you're seeing your narcotics task forces closing down across the state.
Okay, and then talked to a fellow yesterday that his son is a recovering heroin addict. And he's talking about Yakima is the closest facility where they administer methadone, which is, and
methadone's going to the wayside with this.
Well, this cured his son, and his son speaks highly of it. And I'm just going to ask, is this going to be part of the treatment as methadone?
No, there will be no methadone inside the Franklin County Corrections Facility. Nope.
So what are we going to be doing with that? What treatment is going to be applied?
What's the name?
I know you're asking me.
Narcan?
No.
Well, no, that's when they're overdosing, giving Narcan stuff. Suboxone. Yeah, you have Suboxone, and then there's another one that's in place for females that may be pregnant and those kinds of things. That's safer. There's different types of drugs that they'll be using to help offset this as they go through and detox.
This has nothing to do with outside treatments. Okay. What happens is when someone comes out of the jail, they're offered a place to go, which is ideal
options.
The ideal options to help them continue with the recovery. That's not our business. Okay. Our business is to keep them alive and reasonably well in the jail, and this is an alternative to do that versus having lawsuits or other issues that take place in the jail. And on top of that, it's pass-through money. And I get that you think that, and we probably all do when we pay federal taxes, that other people are paying those taxes too that are coming in on that grant. It's not just the Franklin County grant.
No, I know that, but to say that it's not our money, it is our money. That's what I'm trying to, unless this is all seized money from drug busts, is what I thought you were telling me. This is the.
No, I told you that it's Burns grant funding money.
Okay.
That is what this money really is at the top, which is the federal grant money that passes through to the state.
Which is still our tax money, to a lesser degree.
Yeah.
So, okay. My questions are satisfied. Thank you, Sheriff.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. With that, it's point of the agenda we have is open for public comment. Do we have any? Okay.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Robinson. I am a resident of Brad Peck's district. I actually had two questions for you folks. The first is what progress has been made, if any, on trying to get these meetings televised in some way or live streamed so that people can actually see in addition to hear these conversations? I mean, we have a number of municipalities across our county and across our state that are really into this. And I understand that saying City of Pasco for some people might be a dirty word, but if you notice, and I'm sorry for the Darth Vader impression, folks, the colds are terrible, but if you notice, people are actually investing in this. It is building public trust, and we are living in a time when our institutions, regardless of your partisan opinions, are losing faith amongst the American people. At some point, we need to open our minds to the idea that it's time to film these, get the public a little bit more involved, since not everyone can be here, and a tape only gives you half of the context of a conversation. You don't see the facial expressions, you don't see the body language, and sometimes you are robbed of context. The second question I ask of you nice gentlemen, because, you know, what the heck, is how does the redistricting process work specifically? Do we have public meetings on that? Because it is my understanding that as 2020 approaches us, we're going to be required to do that in line with the census. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not understanding how this county deals with that and how the proposals for redistricting your districts are done and how you weigh them against state law. So any guidance on that would be absolutely delightful.
As far as redistricting, as far as commissioners in the state of Washington, we can only redistrict no more than once every 4 years. So, and then it's the constituency between the three districts is required to be within 10%. So when it is redistricted, you redistrict within 10%. So, and the 2020 is not a threshold necessarily. It's a consensus or a census threshold, but it really has nothing to do with redistricting. I think we're able, and we've had somewhat discussion about looking into property or populations at this point. So that's more to come. As far as your first question, up until you...
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, would you permit me to comment and speak to the first item before we go to the second?
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is maybe one of the very few times in 10 years that I've seen Commissioner Cook's memory fail him. And I know he knows the correct answer. I think he just maybe is conjoining two thoughts. The state statute actually says that the property or the districts are to be divided by population as equally as possible. And there isn't a specific percentage given. The second thought that I think Commissioner Cook is conjoining is that historically we've become very concerned as the board when we got more than 10% out of balance between the largest and the smallest district. And that's where the 10% I think comes from. But the statute clearly says as equally or evenly as possible. The statute also says that the district should be drawn with the benefit of geographic and geopolitical boundaries to make it easy, presumably to make it easy for the public to follow what those boundaries are. Things like Highway 182, 395, the river shore, those kinds of things are useful. And they're also looking for consistency and homogeneity within the demographics of an area. Maybe the eastern portion of Pasco and the western portion of Pasco and the northern portion of Franklin County, they have similar socioeconomic interests and demographics. And then lastly, I'd point out that we count using the last census updated by precinct numbers to get our population figures. And when I last looked at this was almost a year ago, and at that time we were approaching 15% out of balance between the largest and smallest districts. And I strongly encouraged us to redistrict at that time, tried to get it done before the election filing period last year and was not successful in accomplishing that. So if you want any further details, happy to share those.
I'm an ignorant man in search of knowledge, Commissioner Peck, and that is one thing I would love.
Just trying to help.
I genuinely appreciate it, but I do need an answer to the first question I asked you, which is what effort, what of any kind is being made to get these televised? Because the tape alone isn't going to work.
Okay, forgive me, but that's Commissioner Cook has the floor on that. He just permitted me to speak to that one issue.
Until you can get streaming up in North County, it's not going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
this charter does not go to North County.
The website, however, is universal and you can still stream it on the website, but I do understand the point you're making and I respect your answer.
Okay, thanks. We did have another hand. Yes.
Hello. My name is Wendy Maiden. I live at 2413 North Road 72, Pasco. Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Peck, and Commissioner Didier, thank you for allowing me to speak with you again. In regard to proposed short plat 2018-24, I thank you for your support of the neighbors earlier today. Look forward to seeing how that's going to play out. The planning director recommended approval of the waiver request due to no material detriment to the neighborhood. We, the neighbors, have taken the time to speak up, and many more of them wanted to be here today and absolutely couldn't, but they wanted to be. Have taken the time to speak up because these requested waivers will be detrimental in two ways. First, the spacious livability that we all bought into when we moved here will be affected. Narrow lots will substantially change the spacious feel of our neighborhood to the point that one resident has said they would consider moving if this went through. Waiving the lot dimension codes that define and protect our neighborhood will only serve to invite future developers to do likewise, further compounding the harm done. Second, property values will likely be affected. Buyers are willing to pay a premium for large lots in a neighborhood of similarly large lots. When it comes time to sell our homes, will buyers be willing to pay a premium for large lots surrounded by narrow lots? Probably not. The pool of buyers would be almost guaranteed to shrink, and with less demand, prices would likely be reduced from what they would have been, and the length of time to sell would increase. Also, I have spoken this morning with a couple of the neighbors. One was with me today. Alex Bedoya is the neighbor who lives on Richardson Road. He was here. And I've spoken with Becky Hissom, who is another neighbor whose side lot faces Richardson Road. And they and my husband and I are supportive of removing one lot, which reduces the frontage. If you take the 590 foot, that's 450, and divide it by 4, you're down to 110 foot or 112 foot frontage. And the four of us anyway are fine with that. Can't speak to the other neighbors, but that would be fine with us. And we were glad to hear that comment brought up today. I was concerned, however, about his comment about Mr. Case's comment about 1/4 acre lots. That felt like a threat. It is an RS20 zoning, which requires 2 houses per acre. If I may be allowed to ask the question, how would he be able to put 4 houses per acre in our area?
If I may, I think that'd be a great conversation for you and Mr. Bratton to have after the meeting. That way you're not constrained by time, and he can answer all your questions.
I will do that. Thank you. And then one more comment that I wanted to make, and I referred to this in the addendum letter that I sent in, that the sign for the developer, the real estate agent, and the builder went up before the public comment began, and it shows the lot dimensions on there. So therefore, when the public comment letter came out, people did not believe that their public comment would make any difference, and that's why you did not see even more response. I decided, since I have the time, I'm early retired, I decided to go ahead and write it up and take it around and see what the response would be. And people, one after the other, said, I would have done something about this earlier, or I would have done something about this, but I didn't think it would matter. So I would like to encourage you to disallow signs like that until after a public comment period is completed. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll pay some bills.
Okay. Just getting these in order. I see payroll rosters are listed first. So, Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of county roads and motor vehicle payroll and expenses in the total amount of $110,198.59 as presented for the board's approval, and note for the record that these have been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office.
I second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And continuing on, Mr. Chairman, move for approval of salary clearing and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $742,352.28. And note for the record that this too has been reviewed and signed off by 2 representatives of the auditor's office.
There's a motion
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Third and final, Mr. Chairman, move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $706,993.82. As presented, note for the record that this has been reviewed by the county administrator, has been reviewed and signed off by 2 representatives of the auditor's office.
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. With that, we will move on to the consent agenda. Anything that need to be discussed or pulled or motion to,
Mr. Chairman, move for approval of consent agenda as presented with discussion.
I have questions on
that's a second. Then we-
second. I have questions on 1, 2, 6, and 8.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, as the maker of the motion, I have the option to speak first, but I would be pleased to defer to Commissioner Didier and have him speak to those items.
Okay.
On number 1, reappointing Terry Trolson to another 6-year term on the Franklin County Civil Service. Is this a board or, Keith, what is this that we have here for hiring?
Yes, the Civil Service Commission helps review our personnel matters for law enforcement primarily.
Okay. And he was appointed in 15, as I went back and researched. He was appointed in 15. He's looking to be elected for a 6-year term.
Correct.
How many other boards and commissions do we have? And could I get a list of those, please, and their responsibilities?
We can certainly provide you that information. I don't have that off the top of my head, but we certainly can get that for you.
Please.
They're on the website also.
Okay. Just need to know where to go look for those. Okay, on number 2, on the equipment transfer, it says they have no value and that they're no good, but yet they're going to put them in as a backup for our 911 operation?
Yeah, we originally purchased that equipment a number of years ago when we had our own standalone Franklin County dispatch center. But because we have consolidated with CCOM, they have implemented new technology. They desire us to use this Viper system as a potential backup in the E911 center over there. But we don't really have a use for it because we no longer have a dispatch center.
But in the brief here, it says that we didn't purchase it, that we were given, it was given to us by the military.
The state military funds were used to, somewhat like a grant, to provide that one time for us. So it wasn't general fund or current expense fund dollars from the county that were used to purchase the equipment.
But we just had a mishap with our 911 where it was out.
Yes, that was related to a kind of a nationwide outage of CenturyLink's fiber delivery to our E911 center. Somewhat independent of this particular issue, but yes, we're aware that we are.
So if that happened again, this would be set up to take its place?
No, this would be more of a failure of the telephone system as opposed to the fiber providing data and internet service to the center.
Okay.
This is more of a hardware than a software issue.
Okay. On item 7, and it's the termination of personal service contract with Lady of Lords. I just heard that we're going to be using Lords on this for the addiction problem, but yet last meeting and this meeting we got termination with Lords on 2 different services.
That's correct. Mr. Banks may want to speak specifically to the juvenile center and their relationship with Lords, but for your benefit, Lords has recently undergone a acquisition. They're being acquired by a new company last year.
Mm-hmm.
Their business model has changed from a not-for-profit to a for-profit business model, and that has caused them to reevaluate their contractual relationships with a number of organizations. And so we have a number of different contracts with Lords, one of which is to provide medical services in our jail facility. Another one we've had with the Juvenile Service Center. They have notified us that they don't want to continue with the juvenile service. It's not profitable for them, and so they have notified that we're going to...
So the 2 that were terminated, who's taken over on those responsibilities? Where are we going for those?
I'll let Mr. Banks speak specifically to the Juvenile Service Center. We're going out for a new proposal for a service provider at the juvenile facility. And that's typically what we will do, is if Lords decides that it's not profitable for them or not in their best business interest, then we would solicit proposals from other providers.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Johnson did a nice job explaining that. Where we are currently, as of yesterday, I have the health department is going to be a bridge for us for about 6 months while we go out to bid. So I am working on a contract right now with the health department, and then we'll go out to bid and see who we have out there that will bid on our services. We've had Lords has been our medical provider for quite a number of years. The dollar amount for that contract has not changed over those years. So we've been paying roughly a budget at $77,000 for that contract. I suspect any new bids will come substantially higher than that.
Yeah. All right. And while you're there, Mr. Banks, the Juvenile Justice Center budget, I looked through it on item number 8, and I was just sort of shocked a little bit at the dollar amount.
Are you talking the boiler?
No, not the boiler. I think 8 is
flat payment.
The flat payment. Franklin County's responsibility is $2,021,000 on an overall budget of $5,689,000. Can you just sort of briefly tell us what all that money's going to for the Juvenile Justice Center, for the operations and facilities? I mean, how much is rent? What are we talking about? Drug treatment over there too? What is all this money going to?
We have a substantial number of services that it's going to. The budget is developed through a 5-year at-risk youth average between the counties. And so Franklin County's portion of that is, I believe, Keith, 34%. Close. And so that's how we come up with, how much Franklin County pays, how much Benton County pays.
Right.
To go through everything that we do at the juvenile court, I'd love to sit down and talk to you about that.
I think I'll get together with you here, but what are we talking for number count of individuals? How many are in this?
Well,
on average.
The juvenile court is more than a detention center and a courtroom. We have roughly at any given time around 360 kids on probation. We have a civil process where we work with abused and neglected children. We have so that comes through our court process. And then we have CASA program that has volunteers. We have over 130-some volunteers at this point that work with us in various capacities. We have 700 and some kids that come through our diversion process every year. We have probably 4 or 5 different evidence-based treatment programs in addition to a lot of positive youth development type programming that will deal with kids. So, I can't be prouder of that juvenile court and the staff that we have there and the amount of work we're doing. What I have right now is building that's falling down around my ears. So I'd love to.
That's what I just got to get up to speed on everything because, I'm looking through these and reading through these numerous times, 2 or 3 times, and every time I read through that, I even underlined it. It's shocking that we have this much of a problem with our youth. It seems like there's no purpose in life for them anymore, and they resort to drugs. And I think that's what we got to do. We got to give them a purpose in life.
Well, there's a lot of issues and challenges that our kids have that we see there. Like I said, let's sit down and.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Be impressed with what we're doing.
Thank you.
Further questions, comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a couple. On the last 2 items, 9 and 10, for the building services contract with Franklin County and City of Connell and City of Mesa, it's a fairly long-standing practice. We've had 3-year contracts with them, and now we've dropped that to 1. So the first question was that a change that we requested, or did they ask for that?
Yeah, when I reviewed the contracts, it looked like we started with Connell in 06, Mesa in 13, and that recommendation was to enable me to do a fiscal analysis to determine if I need to recommend changes.
So these 2 were requested by us?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I don't have any other questions.
All right. If there's no further questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That will finish our consent agenda. Move on to Keith's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. First item, I just need a decision or I don't need a resolution, a motion. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. A motion to approve an invoice or a series of invoices related to the prosecutor's office annual training day and office retreat. We've had some discussion of this issue in the past. We are in process of developing a policy that better addresses some of these kinds of issues, but there's been a long-standing practice in the prosecutor's office of having an annual training day where all of their office staff are invited to participate. Part of that day includes providing a meal for those office employees. The auditor's office has suggested that they're not comfortable approving that invoice or those invoices without commissioner approval. And so the immediate action that I'm asking for the board to consider and either approve or disapprove or ask it to come back is related to the specific expenses of the prosecutor's office training day. And then the recognition that we are in the process of developing a more global policy that fits all of these kinds of events for other offices in the courthouse and across the county that have a need for staff development and training that is not currently addressed as well as it could be in our training policies. And so I want that before you in terms of consideration today. Total bills right now are about $370. It's not a huge dollar amount, but it's more the practical application of a policy for the county. So with that, I'd answer your questions. I recognize that the prosecutor himself and his civil deputy cannot be here. They're both in trial today. I'm glad to answer whatever questions you may have.
Thoughts, questions?
Yeah, my question is, why can't they just have their training day at the courthouse? And what if we're going to do it for the prosecuting office, then we got to have that available for every department, I feel, on a fairness issue.
Sure.
So until every department has their training day and their ability for a meal, I don't think it's proper to be passing this for one department.
Yeah, we've had some discussion. I know the auditor's office has communicated with other counties to see how a couple of programs are working, where they set aside a day as a countywide training day. I think one of our counties uses Columbus Day, for example, where a lot of the banks and other federal institutions may be closed, but county businesses typically open. They set aside that day as a training day for all of the county employees. So each department can meet their own training needs, but there may also be a need for a countywide or a larger group receiving some training. We have a number of issues with bloodborne pathogens and other communicable diseases, some HR training that's good to be distributed across the counties, but each office certainly has particular issues that they need to cover just related to their office. With the prosecutor's office, I'm not characterizing it as specifically unique or different from any other county department or function, but they typically, with court schedules and other things, find it difficult to schedule a training day where everybody's available. But they do this typically during the holiday season when trials have slowed down, and do it right before the end of the year. It's not a coincidence, I suppose, that it happens during the holiday season, and there's a flavor of a holiday office party in terms of recognition of employees that have done good things during the year and recognizing them for their effort. I suppose there's concern that is not generally available to all of our county employees, because some offices don't attempt to use public funds for what would amount to be otherwise a holiday party. So that there's certainly that concern that this could veer into that. The prosecutor's office has provided an agenda for their day. They've shown that it's a training and office development day, and Sean has made that mandatory attendance for his employees to be there. So
I think it would be wise of us to make that Columbus Day possibility for all departments, and maybe even have a listening session with the commissioners from those departments on their concerns and needs. I think this could be a get-together by the courthouse and a come-together moment. Maybe build some team unity where we all work together. I like that.
Great suggestion. I know Sheriff Raymond last year kind of facilitated and coordinated a countywide employee barbecue that was held outside in the parking lot. It was a great event. We've found value in that just kind of relationship. No county funds, of course, were used for that particular event. It was contributed by elected officials and department heads. But in concept, I think that's a good suggestion, is to set some time aside to sharpen the saw, as Stephen Covey would say. But yeah, it makes sense for us to. And so we have some work and communication to bring that idea, that concept or policy together. But in the short term, I need to tell the auditor's office whether the board will approve these vouchers or not.
So I remember seeing the breakdown, but I don't remember see it here now. What was there this particular, if I'm not mistaken, was $300?
Yeah, I want to say 370. Tim Anderson at the auditor's office sent me a note of you.
Anyway, was all of this food, or was some of this training personnel?
It appears that $109.28 was for presenter lodging and $215 for staff meals. And then they also provided some refreshments from Costco at $46. So
it was broken up.
Yeah. Say 2/3 of it was meals and 1/3 of it was for professional staff to come in and do some training.
It's going to get to be a pretty good-sized chunk of change if every department does that. So I think Sheriff Raymond did his out in the parking lot, and I don't know why they can't pass the hat and pay for this themselves if they want to do it. Why it has to be taxpayers' money. I'm all in agreement for them to get together and have their training day, but I say until the whole courthouse and all the departments can come together for this training day, I think they need to do it on their own.
So, good points. I would certainly endorse the notion that we need to have a more comprehensive, more appropriate policy than we have now. There's a number of county policies that we've been working on for years to get updated, and this is one of them for sure. So I'll set aside the question for now as to who should pay for what, and we'll have that conversation in the development of the new policy, and concur with Commissioner Didier's comments about the opportunity for a listening session, a number of things. Those are all good ideas. I will note that logistically, I think it's going to be really difficult for all the departments to do training simultaneously on a given day, given the shortage of conference rooms and the difficulty of getting an entire staff of a department in one place and having effective training. But again, those are all things that we can work out as we discuss a policy. With respect to the question that's before us today, which is should we pay for an expense that was already incurred under the current understanding and under the current policy, there's two reasons that prompt me to say, or three actually, that prompt me to say, yeah, we probably ought to approve it. One is the same opportunity was available to other departments. The fact that other departments didn't do it and didn't ask for reimbursement doesn't mean that it wasn't similarly situated or equally available to them. The second I would make is that the practice as to whether or not it's lawful has been notably conducted by our prosecuting attorney's office through at least the last two prosecuting attorneys and probably 7 different civil attorneys that have served this board, and all of them have not only deemed it lawful but have participated. So I think since they are our attorneys and they are the ones to whom we look for legal advice, it probably is lawful and probably is a reasonable assumption on our part to assume that it's lawful. Lastly, is it good practice? That's debatable. I think the policy going forward is where we address that, but on this particular one, I think it's appropriate to approve it and then look to a policy to make sure that everybody's on board and has the same opportunity, and we as a board can decide whether or not we think that these things ought to be funded in the future.
Honestly, I think it should be part of their budget program in the fall when we're setting up budgets to set up a training budget.
Yeah, this would come out of their budget. That's part of their training budget.
Yeah. So with that, because it was in his training budget, I have a hard time paying again, so to speak.
Right.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that last comment. Did you say?
I would have a hard time paying it if it is in their training budget.
Perhaps I'm not understanding you.
Are they not asking for additional money?
No. It's not would not be a budget impact per se. It's certainly a fiscal or financial impact. They would spend money that they have in their training budget for this.
Yeah, they budgeted for this. They spent the funds, but the warrants were not approved by the auditor's office, so they're asking us to give the go-ahead.
Even though they're in the training budget, auditors don't want to pay it.
Correct.
I have a hard time with that.
Well, I think certainly the auditor raises some legitimate questions about what is our county policy. And I would say this is not just coming from the county auditor. The state auditor has made comments not only to us but to other entities that they audit about the importance of having complete fiscal policies. And certainly this, as Commissioner Peck mentioned, one of a number of policies that we're needing to update and modify, but it's something that speaks to what could be construed as a personal expense as opposed to a county expense. I think the auditor raises a fair question and just wants to make sure that as they approve these vouchers or the warrants for payment, that they're doing so with the permission and consent of the county commissioners.
So you're just looking for a consensus, basically?
Yeah, I'd prefer a motion, a second, and a majority vote, but I'll defer to you.
Take whatever we give
you. Yeah, exactly.
Further thoughts, commissioners?
Again, we're talking about taxpayers' money paying for a party, and I'm against that. Funds could be used in a better means, I think. They can still have their training. If they want to have a party, they can pay for it themselves out of their own pocket, not the taxpayers' money. So I will not be seconding this motion.
Commissioner?
Well, just a point of clarification, Mr. Chair, I don't believe there is a motion on the table that...
If there was a motion.
Certainly be happy to accept your comment as a motion to disapprove, if that's your intent. Okay, well, Mr. Chairman, there's no motion on the table. The county administrator has asked us for input and guidance. I think I've already been fairly clear on the basis that I believe it to be lawful and not inconsistent with current policy. I would move for approval of funding the request with the stipulation that before any further such claims are paid, the county enact a new policy applicable to all departments to give better clarity.
Is there a second? Here in a second. No.
Chair is able to second if you're declining to second. Am I correct? You are?
I didn't hear a second, and I am not going to second.
Okay.
So the
all right.
motion fails. Anything else, Keith?
Yes. I believe that's all I had in the way of office business. I am going to request an executive session. If you want to do the public comment period first, I'll be happy to.
Okay. Yeah, we're at the public comment area then before an executive session. Any further discussion from the public? Seeing none, we'll move into name your executive session.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm requesting a executive session under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph D, reviewing negotiations on performance of a publicly bid contract. Would ask that the members of the board, the clerk, and the track manager, Tom French, be allowed to participate for up to 20 minutes. I do not anticipate board action at the end of that.
Okay.
Tom, our time is up.
We are back in regular session. Finished our executive session. Decisions made. Commissioner gets back here. We'll see if there's any further discussion. Anything else for the good of the board? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Hello, Craig. Oh,
We were still in executive session and forgot I can't hear that. That's the
3, 4, test, test, test. How's the levels look?
I see 3 bars. When you go from there,
1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. How's the levels look?
around level, same level in the.
1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Test.
Test, 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 test.
That
Test.
one's much higher.
This one's a lot higher.
That one's like 6 or 7 bars.
Okay. We might have to turn that one down a little bit.
Okay, when you're talking just now, it was like 3, 4.
Okay. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Test, 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 test.
3 bars.
Test 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, testing.
3, 4, 4. So far, the whole corner there is low.
Test, 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 test. Test, test.
3 bars.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty good. So.